on things like virtue and philosophy and Aristotle and so forth. He was pretty good. And so he's writing this treatise about virtue, and he comes to the virtue of anger. Got that, folks? Virtue of anger. Okay. Now, when I grew up in the Bronx, you know, it was frowned upon to be angry. You know, you could be angry for maybe a day, tops. If you were Irish, they give you a week, you know, but that was it, okay? Anger is not really good. But Thomas has a whole different attitude to that. He said he bemoaned the fact that, this is question 158 for those of you who will go home and consult the Summa Theologica, okay? He said he complained bitterly that the word for the virtue of anger, manat innominata, remains unnamed. How could he write about a concept that was true, a virtue, and it didn't have any name? So he referred back to John Chrysostom for the early church, okay? The early church, 4th century, and Chrysostom said, he or she who is not angry when there is just cause for anger sins, okay? Why? Because anger respicit bonum justitiae. Anger looks to the good of justice. And if you can live amid injustice without anger, you are unjust. You're committing sin, in his words, okay? And so that's, you know, see, Thomas brought the old Pythagorean idea where virtue is in the middle, okay? So take courage, for example. Courage is just enough of what you need. Foolhardiness, too much. Timidity, not enough, okay? Now, let's look at the word courage. Thomas said that courage was the root of all virtue. In other words, without courage, all other virtue is specious, okay? Specious, okay? Now that speaks volumes, I think. Because once you say that without courage, everything is specious, well, that puts a real premium on being courageous. And taking the example of folks that you see, most of the folks that I've met in the last 10 years have been courageous women for some strange reason, you know? Courageous women, some of them here, some of them still on the boat out there in the Aegean Sea, some of them all over this country, you know? And, you know, I ask when I go up to New York, I say, well, thank you, raging grannies. Where the hell are the raging grandpas? I'm watching football. So if anybody wants to set up a St. Paul, Minneapolis chapter of the raging grandpas, see me later. Let me relate a true story about traveling around this country with a group of Iraqi women who were invited here by Code Pink. This was 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And a couple of us were out in the Bay Area. And we appeared with this Iraqi engineer named Faisa Al-Jaradi, okay? Who, just an amazing woman. She had purview over some of the water purification plants there in Baghdad. That's right, yeah. So she would, we would talk, and we were in Oakland, and we were in Palo Alto, and we ended up in Santa Cruz. You know, you don't get a more progressive sort of group than you do in Santa Cruz, you know. And at each point, the people were clapping as she came in, and say, oh, welcome, welcome. And then she'd tell the story about how her son got kidnapped and how she had to spend the whole family fortune to find where he was and then get him out of prison. She told about her friends who were killed or wounded and how she had to move to Amman in Jordan and how she, you know, was trying to make Americans aware of what was really going on. And everybody's shaking their head and they're saying, oh gosh, that's terrible. Oh, isn't that too bad and all that stuff. Well, in Santa Cruz, she came back to the table. I was sitting right to her left. And she took my pad. And she took out a pencil. And she wrote this. I still have it. So, Americans feel sad for our people, but administration doesn't listen to American people, and American people keep saying, what can we do? What about my poor Iraqis who are suffering death and injury and all kinds of wounding every day? When I come here, I feel welcome. Everybody clap. But at the end, everybody shakes head and says, what can we do? I feel sick. She puts the paper right in front of me. That's what she wanted to say, folks. That's what she wanted to say to the whole assembly. These very nice, progressive folks who kept saying, oh gosh, oh, we really feel for you, but what can we do, okay? Now, in my old age, I'm able to recognize peak moments, you know, moments that I need to reflect on, but I still haven't reached the point where I can diagnose these things myself. So I sent a quick email back to Victoria Roberts, who is co-director of the Servant Leadership School, young woman, incredibly gifted, spirit-filled, talented. I said, Victoria, help me parse this. What was this all about? Why am I feeling the way I do? And next morning I had an email. She said, Ray, don't you remember when we took that interracial training, the Road to Damascus training? We were all together there, and that great big African-American instructor looked at us and he said, you white people, you charge me. You know, he says, if you don't realize that you've got your foot on my neck, and I don't want to hear, oh, I'm sorry about putting my foot on your neck, or I didn't realize I had my foot. I want your foot off my neck. Thank you very much. And you say you can't change things. Take off that knapsack full of white privilege, folks. Take off that knapsack. Look into it, okay? And what you'll find, there are things that... Now, to do that, you might have to stick your neck out, okay? You know, nobody likes to stick their neck out. I mean, necks are nice connection between head and torso. One doesn't stick one's neck out without thinking. But you know, if there is nothing for which you will stick your neck out, then your neck has become your idol, and necks are not deserving of idol worship. Now I realize that I'm talking to the choir here in many respects, that a lot of you have stuck your neck out, and even more than your neck out. But for those of us who need a reminder about that, or those of us who need something to tell their friends, it really is necessary to be willing to open up that knapsack of white privilege and see what's in there. Now I had an incredible reminder of white privilege last time I was thrown in jail. And this was after Hillary Clinton had her goons set upon me and you know, kind of roughed me up pretty bad, throw me into the 2nd District Jail of the District of Columbia. And I was met there by this great big, looked like a Redskins football reject, you know, he's about 6'8", big African-American guy with black gloves, black hat, you know. Yeah. And I come in the door and he says, come on over here. Now I'm from the Bronx, right? There's only one answer to that kind of thing, and that is, didn't your mother ever tell you how to say please? But at 72 years of age, I said, you know, that might not be appropriate in these circumstances. So I swallowed that. And I was very, they even said I was compliant. I hate that word, you know. I'm never compliant, but in these circumstances, you know. But the thing is, folks, what I want to tell you is this, that this means something, okay? My eldest son married a Mexican Indian, okay? And so 3 of my grandchildren have different color skin, okay? And Catherine, when she was 4, was holding my wife's hand. And when she saw the skin on my wife's hand, she called to her big brother, Matthew, Matthew, come here, look. Grandma has the same kind of skin as Daddy. It looks crazy. Right? Okay. Now, I looked at my skin in that jail, and I said, I'm going to be out of here in a couple hours. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't completely sure, but hey. So I carved my wife's name into the iron bed that they had there, you know, and I was relaxed. Not so the guy next to me. An African-American, about 40 years old, okay? You know, I use the old phrase, what are you in for, you know? he said, drinking in public. I said, drinking in public gets you in jail? He said, well, yeah, I had a paper bag around it, but my friend ratted me out. And so then, about 2 hours into our stay, big black guy comes in again, and he says, all right, McGovern, here's some papers, you sign this, you can get out of here. Murphy, look, you're going to be with us again overnight. Marshals coming in, and they came in and they shackled. Have you seen people shackled? Yeah. It takes marshals, experienced marshals, 3 or 4 minutes to put shackles on people. And I had to watch that. And I was so embarrassed. It was so obvious, drinking in public, whatever I was doing. And Murphy never turned around to say goodbye or anything. It was just too painful for him, and it was too painful for me. So here's a vivid illustration, and I've seen it before when I was arraigned for not leaving John Conyers' office. Dan Ellsberg referred to the oath that the Army and Marine officers and other officers take to respect the Constitution of the United States and against all enemies, defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I told John Conyers that there wasn't any expiration date on that, and that I was there to see that he honored his oath to impeach George Bush. He didn't like that much, so he called the Capitol Police and ended up in jail that time. But the point is, when I was arraigned 2 months later, I had to sit all day and watch people be shackled for drinking in public, shackled for driving on an expired license. Predominant, like 90% African American, 7% Hispanic, and there's a 1 or 2. So I want to wrap up here, and sorry about the video. We had some fairly good stuff, and if we can get it going, maybe during the dinner time or something, we can do something. But my prescription for what we can do really goes back to a lecture I heard Mother Teresa give. We Fordham alumni sort of, I don't know how we did it, but we got her to address us at Catholic University in Washington. And at the end of her speech, in her humble way, she said, now, I expect that if the past is precedent here, that after I'm finished, people will come up and they'll say, oh, Mother Teresa, you do wonderful things. I wish I could do the things that you can do. And I just want to tell you all right now, and it was as if she was looking right into our eyes. She said, I really wish that I could do the things that you can do. Hello, she can't do the things. She couldn't do the things that we can do. We're all in our own little settings. We can do lots of things that Mother Teresa, nobody else can do, okay? And I think the way we do that is not alone. We form small groups. Like, I think 5 is ideal, 4 is just as good, 6 verging on too many. Small groups where you get together every week and you share, okay? People, that that you're simpatico with, you get together and you share. And you will be amazed, I guarantee it, at what imaginative things come out of that sharing. Things to do, things to support one another on, not only mutual support, but mutual accountability. Now, you said that you were going to do this, you're going to get in touch with so-and-so last week. Have you done it? Okay, that kind of gentle stuff, it's really, really where it's at. And I think that's what I recommend. That's the discipline I've learned in the community of the Church of the Savior. And, let's not deceive ourselves into thinking that, we can't do the things that others do. Take Rosa Parks, for example. After Rosa Parks did what she did, refusing to get in that part of the bus or get up, Eleanor Roosevelt, one of my new idols because I keep learning more and more about her, she went to the headmaster of the Highlander School where Rosa Parks and so many others studied, and she said, did you tell Rosa Parks what she was to expect were she to do something like this? Being called a communist? Being called a terrorist or anarchist? And what did you warn her? And what did the head of the Highlander School say? Oh, no. Why did you not? Well, we loved Rosa Parks, but she was just drinking it all in, and she would have been the last one, the very last one we would have thought that would have started the bus bike boycott, that would have stood up to the thing. So if you feel like you would have been the very last person to step out in courage, Be aware that you may be called to do it, and you know what? You'll be given the strength and the love and the compassion to do it. I'd like to finish on a more joyful note, because the end of that prayer did talk about rejoicing, didn't it? Okay. It's a poem. It's from William Butler Yeats, and it has to do with my Irish heritage. Okay. It's the Fiddler of Dooney. Do you know it? You do know it. When I play my fiddle in Dooney, folk dance like a wave of the sea. My brother is priest in Kilvarnet, my cousin in Bachnabawee. I passed my brother and cousin. They read from their book of prayer. I read from my book of song that I bought at the Sligo Fair. When we reached the end of time with Peter sitting in state, he'll call the three old souls, but he'll ask me first through the gate. For the good are always the merry, save by an evil chance, and the merry love the fiddle, and the merry love to dance. And when the folk up there see me, they'll all come up to me saying, here's the Fiddler of Dooney, and they'll dance like the wave of the sea. So I wish you courage, I wish you justice, I wish you love in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr., and I wish you rejoicing and joy in the spirit of the Fiddler of Dooney. And I'd like to take whatever questions we have here.
Thank you very much. We do have some time for questions, so we're running behind, but I'm told that the organizers say it's okay. Can we use it?
Right.
Yeah, Bob.
You talked about the Audacity of Hope and the other boats that were going on this mission, and I saw some information about a second boat that was coming from France, which didn't actually get to Greece. They went directly, separately, and I'm wondering if you know what's happening with them.
My impression is that they had to refuel in Greek waters, and they've been prevented. Now, I'm not sure of that, but that was the latest information I had. There were none out there. You know, the Irish boat that was going to be out there docked in Turkey and got sabotaged. Another thing, 2 of them were sabotaged, and that was another reason why our captain just wanted to get that boat. Here was I, with 2 other people looking over with a flashlight, looking over the side of the boat at night, you know, thinking that if the Israelis were going to do it, they would do it to our boat that night before we get out. We didn't see any bubbles or anything like that, but so we were defenseless, really, and so yeah, I don't think any boats are free and clear. But the Spaniards are really, you know, they occupied their embassy and told their ambassador and the foreign ministry, look, you intercede with us with the Greek government, because this is a bunch of hokum. This business about us needed to be inspected another time and another time. So the Greeks are terribly embarrassed, but you know, we should hold them accountable as well. We have been. Yes, please.
Oh, well, 2 things. But first, I needed this inspiration, you know, to keep doing what we're doing. But the second positive thing, you know, I've learned that when we're out protesting and people go by, you don't give you the finger. I think of it as the half a peace sign. And then they don't, if you tell them it's half a piece, they may not do it again.
Yeah.
It helps my attitude.
Good. It's a helpful thought. Somebody here, or right behind?
I'll get it. Hi, I really appreciate you making mention of Rachel Corrie. Her aunt goes to our church, and we have been appraised so often of what's going on. And I don't know now what's going on with the trial, the civil trial that they brought in Palestine, but it's really a strange kind of trial. The man that killed Rachel Corrie, he was protected behind a screen from the family when he testified. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I've been following that as well. As a matter of fact, when I was out in Olympia about 6 years ago, I had like a 3-hour brunch with Cindy and Craig Corrie. and it was an incredible experience. At one point, Craig looked at my orange bracelet and he said, "What's that about?" I said, "Oh, it's against torture." And I took it off and showed him. I said, "What's the green thing about?" And all it says is Rachel Corrie, the date of her birth, and the date that she was killed. He looked at me and said, "Would you like to have it?" I said, "Do you have others?" He said, "Yeah, I got others." So I've been wearing this since then, except I broke 3 of them. And we wanted to have them on the boat. Okay. Now the Corries are, you know, in the thick of things with the thing. But Craig got back to Olympia, ordered these things, and they arrived at the Greek hotel we were staying at just the day before we all left, and we all had them on, you know. Now, this gives me courage to know that one young woman of 23 years is willing to stand up to the bulldozer, you know. If she can do that, and I can do other things, you know, and you all can do other things, and that's why we're here, and we should rejoice about that. Craig and Cindy were not sure how the thing was going to end, but that guy did testify just earlier this week, I think, or last. So, but that's, you know, these people, that's why we need to call the Rachel Corries and others into our presence when we get together, because they are witnesses, martyrs in the real sense. Yeah, please.
Do you have any suggestions about where we can put the pressure related to Bradley Manning? Speaking of the saints that we have to hold up,
yeah,
in minded spirit.
Well, thank goodness Dan Ellsberg and others are hard on that, and there's a Bradley Manning support team. I'm actually on it, and he'll be coming to Fort Belvoir for his Fort Belvoir in Virginia, just outside of Washington, for his trial. That's the latest I know. Anybody know any different? Yeah. Okay, and you know, we'll be out there en masse to the degree it makes sense to be there without alienating completely the military authorities, but they're after him big time, and the fact that he was tortured, just 32 miles from where I live in Quantico, Virginia, that's just so unconscionable, and so beneath what we used to be as Americans, that we're just hoping for the best. But he has a strong support team, and the press is even asking a lot of questions about it, as they did about the Audacity of Hope. They really tried to pin down maybe some of you saw that press conference where the woman was all flustered. I don't know about the law of the sea. Well, what are you standing up there for? Does anybody in this building know about the law of the sea? So, yeah, there's another one over here.
Well, only in answer to your question about Bradley Manning. At the end of October, I think it's October like 29th or so.
On October 29th, I think it is, in Kansas City, or just outside of Kansas City at Fort Leavenworth, is where there will be another rally. There was just one about a month and a half ago. So just in reference to that, I think you were thinking maybe of something sooner or something we can do right at this moment, but that's one of them. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, please, back there.
Hi, Rachel Corrie is definitely a shining example, but to myself and many other young people, we feel that we are a generation that by and large has become consumed with apathy and indifference on matters like these. What do you have to say to all the young people at We Are Change and elsewhere who are very active and who are very passionate about their works? What would you say to keep them encouraged, since obviously discouragement is not accepted?
Discouraged is not allowed. Yeah, it's a real formidable challenge because there's no draft, and that's the biggie. Nobody has any personal jeopardy that they're worried about, and so you have to appeal to their moral sense. Is it just that most of our armed forces come from the inner city or towns in this country of less than 50,000 people? That's fact. Okay, is that fair? Is that fair? It's not fair. And young people can see the lack of fairness even clearer than most of us. So that has to be drummed into them. The sorrowful thing is that when you would look for moral courage, or at least moral values to be espoused, in times past people looked to churches. And I have to tell you that the institutional church as far as I can see, is riding shotgun for the system.
That's right. Yeah.
And so what does that mean? That means it really and truly is up to us. And my favorite theologian, Annie Dillard, says, you know, there is only us. There never has been any other. And so that's a challenge, but it also is a freeing sort of thing, because nobody's going to look up to their pastor and say, all right, you're afraid that the collection won't be so big if you preach justice, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. We'll preach justice in our own little community here. We'll have Eucharist, we'll have food, and good luck, you know, when you get to the pearly gates, to see how it is when you're asked, what did you do for the least of these? Well, you filled up the collection plates and built nice churches. I don't see anything in the Gospels where Jesus talks about building nice churches or filling up the connection plates. Yes.
Yeah, to expand on that, I've heard a lot about this UN initiative called Agenda 21, I guess called Codex Alimentarius, is sort of a World Health Organization offshoot of that. And from what I've heard and what I've read, it seems to be actually trying to influence church doctrine. Have you heard anything about that? Or
no, I haven't. Yeah, doctrine is I've sort of given up on doctrine. I think it's pretty clear, you know, what's in the good news and what's in the Hebrew scriptures. You know, that's what I learned in graduate study at Georgetown. That Yahweh of the Hebrew scriptures, and Jesus of Nazareth of the Christian ones, and also lately I've been learning about the prophet. You know, they care about one thing above all others, and that is justice. And it's very, very clear, you know. Isaiah says, what are you doing all this prancing around here with incense and all that? So that makes me sick, says God, you know. It makes me sick. Go and do justice. Take care of the widows, the orphans, you know, the refugees, the people in Gaza, the people in our inner cities. And so the instructions are pretty clear. I think we've been debilitated by looking up and seeking moral authority or moral endorsement of what we're trying to do. I'm out of that now. I am very, very, very grateful for the Catholic upbringing that I was exposed to. And I have many, many Catholic friends, and I still consider myself a Catholic. I don't think the Pope is a very good Catholic. I'm sorry to say that. But, you know, grab on to what's good. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and relax, because it's all going to come out well if we keep our faithfulness and our love. I don't want to keep anybody else from, yes, did you have a question?
Make a quick announcement. If you like what Ray has